Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN's Chief Operating Officer, Raul Dominguez, on the show today. Raul joined our team back in 2015 after spending the first part of his career as a Navy helicopter pilot, before ultimately transitioning out to civilian life, which was a better fit for his family and where he wanted to be at that point. He moved over to being a project manager for an IT company installing internet into schools, and after realizing some of the expectations that had been set when he was hired weren't going to be followed through on, he started interviewing for other jobs, which led him to us. We talked about what his day-to-day looks like to hopefully give listeners some insight into what operations-focused team members do and why they are so valuable to your team. We also talked about several tools that we use to help clarify roles and responsibilities here at XYPN and our individual development plans that help us clarify where our team members want to be in 5 years and how we lay the groundwork for them over the next 1 to 3 years to accomplish their goals. Whether you're an entrepreneur thinking about hiring an operations manager or someone who wants to be on the operations side of the house, this episode is for you. XYPN Radio listeners, you're invited to attend the event of the year, and even better, you're invited to get your pass at the best possible price. The can't-miss annual XYPN Live Conference returns to St. Louis in September 2019 with valuable content for new firm launchers and established firm owners alike. Take a couple of days to work on your business instead of in your business, and connect with like-minded financial advisors leading the real financial planning movement. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to get a deal on your pass through the end of the month. But hurry, the price goes up at the first of the year. Visit xyplanningnetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to grab your pass today. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/181. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Raul. Hey, Raul, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Alan. It's great to be here.
So this is officially the second out of, what are we at, 181 episodes? I believe this is the second time I've ever actually recorded in person. I believe it was Scott Frank I recorded at the NAPFA National Conference May 2016? No, 2016, yeah. So it's been a while. So anyway, so we're actually in the office next to each other, which should be fun. So we'll figure out how the mic situation works because I'm not fancy enough to have a dual mic setup. So for anybody that does not know, Raul is our COO here at XY Planning Network, and he has delayed being on the podcast as long as he absolutely can. But Raul and I, just for transparency purposes, are actually brothers. Despite him having the last name Dominguez, Raul Dominguez and Alan Moore are half brothers. We have different fathers, same mom, but grew up together in the same household. So not everybody catches that. But wanted to have Raul come on the show and be able to talk about his career path and sort of what led him here to XY Planning Network, and also start talking a little bit about some concepts we've been exploring lately on the podcast around the visionary integrator role, which is something we've been learning a lot about, what a COO does, how you end up in this career field and all that. So I guess starting out, share a little bit about what you thought you were going to be when you grew up, because I suspect it wasn't, being COO of XY Planning Network wasn't the vision. So what did you think you wanted to be, while you were in college?
Well, so I went to the Naval Academy, so it was fairly clear cut what I wanted to be when I grew up. I went in to be a helicopter pilot, and that was the coolest thing ever. So I wanted to do that for the rest of my life. Having a family kind of changes what you want out of life, and that's why I'm not a helicopter pilot anymore.
It's a really good point, though, that one of the things we have talked about on this podcast some is just that what you want changes over time, and that's okay. So a lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to be a sole practitioner, which is fine. And that's great. And that's all you want to do right now because you've got young kids or whatever it is. But just because that's what you want today doesn't mean that's what you're going to want in 5 years or 10 years and 20 years, and maintaining that flexibility. Because the truth is about being a helicopter pilot, they really only let you do it for 10 years anyway, because once you make a certain rank, you're too important to put in a helicopter anymore. And, it's not like you could fly for your whole career anyway.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I had about one more one more good stretch of flying helicopters before I was relegated to a desk, pushing paper and watching the younger generation pick up the mantle of helicopter pilots.
So you did a couple of tours and had a couple of kids. So share with listeners sort of family dynamics and what ultimately led you to make the decision flying helicopters wasn't the right fit anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I got married when we were living in Pensacola, got pregnant with our first child, and then promptly moved to Japan with the Navy, of course. She gave birth 2 months after we moved there. I deployed 10 days later, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of my Navy career. So when I got back from that deployment, we had a long conversation. She got pregnant again with the second child, Charlie. And then we had another conversation. And at that point in time, we decided that military life wasn't necessarily for us because we wanted to grow a big family and we wanted to be a family.
Yeah, because she was in the Navy as well. So she had full understanding when y'all got married of what she was signing up for, but also maybe both sides of it knew the good and the bad of what it meant for, that it wasn't like you were ever going to stop going on deployment.
Absolutely. And when you're young and single, it's a whole different ballgame. She could fly to meet me in ports, or she could go travel to see her family while I was deployed. Once you start having children, it totally changes the dynamic.
So I had a couple kids, had a couple more. So we have 4 now, 6 and under?
Yep, 4 boys, 6 and under. They all love Montana now that we are here. Some of them enjoy the cold more than others, but it's been a great transition up here.
So Raul's house is chaos, to say the least, and in a good way. It's fun to go over there with my 2 as well, because there's just a lot of kids running around. So you make the decision to leave the Navy. Ultimately, the military trains you for a specific job. So being a helicopter pilot, which there are a couple of civilian-related helicopter pilot jobs, but it's not the most glamorous career, most likely. Did you explore that on continuing to fly helicopters just on the civilian side?
I did. The lifestyle of a helicopter pilot on the civilian side isn't great. Upward mobility, honestly, isn't great. In order to provide the kind of life I want to provide for my family, I would have to fly overseas to go fly, which would kind of defeat the whole purpose of getting out of the military to begin with.
And it's pretty dangerous because it's, fighting wildfires or civilian or, search and rescue. And
yeah, it's definitely a high turnover type job. Not really what we were looking for. Wanted something more stable, more kind of traditional career path, which obviously isn't exactly how it turned out.
Yeah. So how do you make the decision? I'm sure a lot of listeners, especially, are career changers, and they're looking at changing careers. Maybe they're thinking about coming into financial planning. The Navy is full of, or really the military is full of folks that after they do their 20, or maybe they hit 8-10 years, they decide to transition. So how do you make a decision around career when, quite honestly, you have this sort of core skill set around leadership, probably management, detail orientation, because it's been beat into you flying helicopters, but how do you really evaluate civilian jobs and sort of, I guess, how do you even narrow the focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So the military provides a lot of resources when you're transitioning out to help with this kind of thing. As a naval officer and anybody in the Navy, you get a lot of leadership training and operations training, things that would make you a good program manager, project manager. A lot of sales folks come out of the military. So for me, I honestly kind of cheated the system a little bit. I went to work as a program manager at an IT company, which was almost exactly like being in the military without the helicopter flying. I worked with some very smart engineers, some salt of the earth cable pullers, and we went out and did the job, worked 10, 12-hour days until the job was done. It was honestly just like being in the Navy without the ship and without the helicopters.
So what was the job doing? Installs of wires?
Yeah, IT infrastructure for a Fortune 500 IT services company.
I don't even know what that means exactly. I've never been able to quite figure out what you did there. So
basically, I ran a team of about 40 to 45 folks, and we would go into schools in the Dallas ISD school district, and we would rip out all of their hardware from their old wireless and hardwired network and then install new stuff.
All right. So internet install for very, very large projects, which We're actually going through that process with our new office. And I had no idea it was so expensive to get Ethernet cables run around the office. I thought it was just turn on the wireless router and it was no big deal. So you said you cheated just because you feel like it was a very similar job?
Right. The culture that I went from and to was very similar. The type of work I was doing outside of the helicopter flying, of course, was very similar. It was a very large organization, very much like the military. So it was a very easy transition because it wasn't 180 degrees out from what I was doing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that so much of the work was the same except for flying helicopters. Because when you think about like, if you say like, hey, I'm Raul, I'm a helicopter pilot, people think like, oh, he gets to fly helicopters 8 to 10 hours a day. How cool is that? Like, how much of the time were you actually in a helicopter in a given week?
Oh, yeah. So as a Navy helicopter pilot, you spend about 5% of your time, maybe 10% of the time on the top side actually flying. You spend 20 to 30% of your time studying. And the rest of the time is management and projects and operations, depending on what your ground job is.
So it's interesting because I feel like that's sort of the same when you're a financial planner. When you have it's a little different when you have a job, because when you're a staff financial planner, a lot of your day can be spent doing financial planning. But one of the things we like to warn people about when they're going to start their own business is, you can be a great financial planner and that's going to be like 5 to 10% of your time. The rest of the time is spent on operations and policy, policy development and process development and marketing and sales. And it's interesting how different it is, from reality.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a minimum level of, required skill to be a helicopter pilot, but where you really made your money as far as career path goes was what you did on the ground and how you helped other people develop.
And, how much of your superior officers' paperwork you did for them and such. Anybody in the military will know that. So you go work Fortune 500 tech company who, my understanding was, recruited a lot of folks out of the military. So how long were you there, and what made you decide to maybe make a transition when you did?
So I was there for about 2 years. There's a lot of headhunting companies that target military folks transitioning out, and I used one of them. Found this. They've hired a lot of JOs, junior officers, coming out of the military. I was there for about 2 years through about 1.5 iterations of the recycling of the internet hardware in all the schools. When the project was complete, I had a sit-down conversation with my manager about what was next, promotions that I was looking for into vacant spots and things like that. Whenever it was time to have the conversation about which promotions and what my career path actually looked like at that company, it was not what we had talked about before. So the next day I started interviewing for jobs.
And also a lesson for folks when you are hiring people. I've made this mistake myself, and that is trying to sell people the moon. When you first bring them on, you tell them like, oh, don't worry, your salary is going to double in the next couple of years. And you may not even realize you've said it. Quite honestly, I've said things that I don't remember saying, but a team member will say, hey, well, you told me that, this is how it was going to be. And like, I don't remember it. I'm not very good at documenting these things. So quite honestly, I trust their memory better than mine. But when you are hiring, be sure you're realistic with expectations around compensation, around increased responsibilities, because people do remember it. And I'll say that setting lower expectations and beating them, a whole lot better than setting too high of expectations and then not being able to meet them, again, with job responsibilities and compensation, which in our business, I do feel like most of your associate advisors or folks that you're hiring into planning roles, they're looking to become financial planners and they're looking to make more money. So it's really easy to oversell one or both of those. So you have to be really careful because it's just a great way to seed a lot of discontent. So you started interviewing for jobs the next day. One of those jobs was XY Planning Network, which you've said constituted the most awkward interview you've ever gone through.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, Alan is not only my brother, he is my younger brother by 7 years. So sitting in an interview with your little brother might be the most awkward experience of my life, but he actually did it much more professionally than I was anticipating going into the interview.
I actually had a list of prepared questions and went through them. It was so awkward. And just to take a bit of a step back, I think I've shared some of this on the podcast before, but ultimately, when you got hired, we had 5 team members. 5 then, and a couple of months before we started interviewing. So this would have been March of 2016. So December of 2015, if you have ever listened to Michael's podcast where he interviewed me, I talk about having applied for a job. And I applied to be the director of financial planning at a university program, which anyone that knows me knows academia is clearly the best place for me to land. And I applied for a job because I was so overwhelmed and frustrated that I just felt like spinning my wheels. I didn't have any control over the business. Like things were happening that I couldn't figure out. And quite honestly, I just got afraid that I was in over my head. And so I started applying for jobs that I knew I could be successful at. And out of that conversation, after I had done that, Kitsis knew I had done it, and he was actually he was very patient with me. I never did hear back from said university. They never even emailed me or messaged me or anything. And I remember, calming down a little bit and had a conversation with Michael, and he asked the question of, what is it that you need in the business in order to feel like you want to stay CEO, at the time 5 people, CEO is a weird title, but that you want to stay in charge of the company. And I just said, I need someone to run the company. And that was really where we said, okay, we're going to hire a chief operating officer. We're going to post a COO position much earlier than most companies. I suspect most companies don't hire a COO until they've got 15 to 20 team members. And again, we did it at 5. It was a stretch financially. It was a stretch because, we had to delay a couple of hires and that we really wanted to make because we needed this position or felt like we needed the position on board. And anyone who knows me personally will tell you it was the best decision we've ever made for my own sanity and lifestyle because I really was spinning my wheels. So that was sort of where the job posting came from. I guess what about the position was attractive? Because with your background, you can get a job anywhere. How do you decide on which job to take?
There's a couple of things, I guess. One was trust. You are my brother, right? So I kind of trusted that you were honest about what you were telling me about the company, about what the role would be. Another part of that is just excitement at being at the very ground level, of something growing. And I told you whenever I took the job, let's grow the crap out of this thing. I did not actually expect it to do what it's done now, but it's been a great ride. The team has been phenomenal. I couldn't have asked for a better transition.
And at the time, we were not aware that we were going to be opening up a headquarters location in Bozeman, Montana, which would necessitate you moving your family here. Had we told you that at the time, we didn't know it at the time, but had we known and said it at the time, this thing would have turned out a little differently.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. And if we had made the decision about 6 months earlier than we did, I wouldn't have bought a house in Texas when I did.
Yeah, Raul bought a house, and I think 2 months later, we had a meeting, which was sort of I guess we fast forward just around that meeting, we did a leadership retreat. So myself, you, and Kitsis in Nashville. So we got all off campus, since we all work from home, and rented a Airbnb and, all met up. And that was one of the conversations where we said, if we're going to continue to grow, we need centralized operations. We need our people under one roof, and at least in some capacity, just because of the rate at which we were growing. And that was a tough decision. I mean, because ultimately, one of us was having to move, or both of us was having to move because, we not being in the same place and we needed to be.
Yeah. I mean, when we made that decision, there were basically 3 cities that were on the table, right? You lived in Bozeman, Michael lived in DC, and I lived in Dallas. Who are we going to build around? Obviously, DC was off the table because nobody wants to move to DC. Everybody on the team would have probably quit if we'd have told them DC. Then it came down to Dallas with its 7.3 million people that we could draw on for hiring, or Bozeman, which honestly has the culture that matches our company and the culture that we want to continue to instill in the company. And it wasn't an easy decision. We went around about it for a couple months, I think, on where the actual location was going to be. But I think in the long run, Bozeman was definitely the right call.
And we now have that recorded, so we can use that in future conversations. And again, your boys love Bozeman. So one of them refuses to put on pants outside, even when it's snowing. So clearly the kids were built for it. One of the books I read, and I don't know if you've gotten all the way through it, but that we mentioned recently on the podcast, I've actually gotten a couple of emails after having mentioned it. It's called Rocket Fuel. And it's all about the visionary integrator relationship, which I wish I had read when you were coming onto the team, because I had no idea that's what it was. I was just thinking I need someone to run the day-to-day operations. I was traveling a lot. I know actually around the time that you were coming on board, I had a flight every single week for 3 months straight. Some of that was work. Some of that was personal because my now wife was there in University of Illinois. So it was central Illinois. So it was tough to get to. So I was flying there to see her and going to conferences and speaking and that sort of thing. So I just knew I needed someone to hold down the fort. But I guess, how far are you through Rocket Fuel now?
I'm about 3/4 of the way through.
So what are you seeing from that as you've sort of gone through and learning about how they define visionary integrator?
It's pretty closely related to how we accidentally fell into our, I guess, relationship as it relates to the company.
Yeah. So especially for the entrepreneurs that are thinking about growing. You don't have to want to grow a big business, but if you want to grow beyond just yourself doing all the financial planning work and running the company, I think it's a great book because it really defines the two roles that the running the company. So you had the visionary, which is really the role that I fill, which is it's 1,000 ideas a minute, most of them bad, some of them good, one of them, a year is great, hopefully. And that's sort of what keeps us moving forward. As we grow, the visionary responsibilities sort of get instilled in the whole company because they're the ones generating the ideas and that sort of thing. But it's really about strategy. How would you define the integrator role, since it's sort of a weird word for people that haven't read the book?
Yeah, absolutely. My job as the integrator is to take all those big dreams, filter some of them out, which Michael Kitts helps me with. And then we take the ones that are good and that we want to run with. And then I coordinate with the team to implement them. And then I'm in charge of the day-to-day, making sure the wheels stay on the bus, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, and we see this relationship. We had Dana and Rob on recently, and if I'm remembering right, they don't have any staff members, so brother-sister combo, and running their financial planning practice and tax practice, and he's very much the visionary, and she's very much the integrator. So I quite honestly, if you have an opportunity to partner, if you are a visionary and you see that in yourself, if you have the opportunity to partner with an integrator early on, it will make your life so much better because, visionaries are the chase the shiny object, right? We're the dog from Up. If you've ever seen that movie where, you just can't focus, right? And that's okay. I mean, and that's companies need that, but they also need the operator to actually pull that all together.
Yeah, I'd say in most companies, having two visionaries would be a very real struggle. EOS actually doesn't recognize a two visionary system. So XY is a little unique there with Michael and Alan. But yeah, as an integrator, you're more mired in the day-to-day, daily routine of running the company. So if you are a visionary and you're working with an integrator, be kind to your integrators, please.
Yeah, so you're referencing the fact that whenever you look at the personality of a visionary, Michael and I are both visionary personalities. Michael actually, some people can be both visionaries and integrators. He probably has the gift of being able to do both. So either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, he does not work in XY full time. If he was here in Bozeman full time, the dynamics would be different. But that's what Raul's referencing is that the EOS or Entrepreneurship Operating System, which we have really enjoyed. If you're first starting out, it's not as applicable just because it really starts. I think their sweet spot starts around 20 employees, but it comes down to probably as low as 5 is what I've seen. When you're first starting out, the book traction is not going to be as applicable for you. But if you're looking to grow and you're starting to add some team members, it's a really great framework for running the business. It's a system for running the business. And that's where Rocket Fuel is the same author that wrote both books. So he sort of defines this relationship. So what does a COO do, right? Like as the vision, like as the entrepreneur, we do everything. So if I'm hiring an operations manager or a COO or whatever the level of title is, like what types of tasks am I handing off to that COO?
That's a very hard question to answer. And I knew this question was going to come up on the podcast. And then, I thought about it. Basically, I do whatever needs to be done that is not done by somebody else. My primary responsibility is the P&L. And then coordinating operations amongst all of our directors here between marketing and sales, and then all the member-facing stuff with compliance and member service and advisor success. Up until very recently, I did all of the onboarding. I'm still the IT guy for the company, which one day will change.
Ran a couple conferences?
Yeah, ran a couple conferences until we hired Tori, which is super awesome, but I'm not doing that anymore. So basically, whenever you get in as the integrator, you just do whatever needs to be done to keep the ship moving forward until you can hire out the rest of the team.
Yeah, I like that framework. We had someone, I'm trying to remember who it was, on that they were the president of the company, and they said their job was to do everything the CEO doesn't want to do. I like your framing a little better because it does lend itself to this belief that like the visionary / CEO / entrepreneur / person that started the business sort of gets to just go do all this, whatever they want to do, which is not reality. There are a lot of days where, quite honestly, as now that we have about, if you include Advice Pay, FA Bean Counters, and XY Investment Solutions, we're approaching 50 team members now. So obviously, if anybody ever wants to talk about the evolving role of going from a one-person show to having almost 50 team members and what CEO really means at that point, I'm happy to have that conversation. But CEO doesn't just get to go do whatever they want, but a lot of the activities take me away from running the business and just being sure that, again, the wheels stay on the bus, that things like performance reviews and compensation reviews and weekly team meetings and monthly, all hands meetings and all those things they actually happen. Because if they don't happen, then you sort of devolve into this chaotic world where a lot of entrepreneurs live, and it's really hard to keep team members engaged in chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been very blessed as the integrator in this relationship to have a great team goes along with us, and we've experienced growing pains. And if you're growing your business, you'll see the same thing where what you're doing works for a while, and then you reach a certain size, whether that's revenue, clients, or team members, and then that stops working because it's just not enough, and then you have to iterate. We've iterated now. I think we're on our third or fourth iteration of just a meeting cadence, right?
Yeah.
As we try to grow the team and not waste people's time and make meetings more and more efficient. And right now we're in the middle of implementing the EOS meeting schedule, which has been very cool. But the team has been great during this growth period.
Yeah, I mean, if you're solo hiring one or two people, again, the EOS systems is probably overkill. It may be worth a read just because it's some cool components I think that you can implement, such as having a really well-defined meeting cadence. Because again, ultimately, if you're trying to have meetings every week and you're busy, or you go into client meetings instead of your team meeting, and it is chaotic, it's really hard for the team to figure out which direction's up, because as an entrepreneur, it's really easy to change what's up every day, and this is the priority. And the next day, no, this other thing is really important. We've all worked for that person that can't, every day changes their mind, or every day, they're reading a new book, and whatever book they're reading takes over the office for a couple of weeks. They read Checklist Manifesto and suddenly everything's about making checklists. And then they read Zappos and suddenly everything's about employee culture, and they totally forget about checklists. And it's the gift and the curse of being a visionary, is trying to go learn and pull in those components. But ultimately, it's the integrator's job is to be sure that when, the checklists are created, that remains, and that that's something that you continue to do on an ongoing basis, and you don't stop. Yeah.
I'm very fortunate in the fact that Alan only comes back with about 3 ideas per business book that he reads, and then we actually only implement about 1 of them per book, and he does about a book a week, I think is his goal. So not too many right out of the gate.
Yeah, I have a book a week goal. I'm probably sitting at 1 every 2 weeks right now. Ski season, I read a lot more because I listen to books on the way up, and then I actually listen on ski lifts. You don't realize 75% of your time at a ski resort is actually spent on the lift. And so, especially early season, not a lot of people up there riding lifts by myself, listening to books, coming up with ideas. So, all right, so back to the framing of what a COO does, because I know a lot of advisors are trying to figure out, who do I hire first? So at XY, our team member number 1 was Maddie. And, we called her our director of getting things done. So we don't have to be explicit on this podcast. You can look on the website for her official job title. But she did a little bit of everything. Quite honestly, she did the work. Hiring Maddie was the equivalent of a financial planner hiring a paraplanner to actually do a lot of the financial planning work. Hire number 2 would have been, trying to think of the order, would have been marketing. So a full-time marketing person, and then full-time sales to take the sales off my plate. And then we hired compliance and academy. So we hired someone we hired our, let's see, do we have Scott? Scott was on the team when you were brought on. So yeah, we had full-time compliance, we had full-time sort of education person. And then we brought in someone to run the company, which I feel like that's actually a reasonable order. It's going to be a little different for financial planning firms. You probably aren't going to hire marketing and sales early on unless you really want to grow, which was our goal. But, focusing on hiring people to do the work and to run the business. Whereas I feel like most advisory firms are focused on, bring in a sort of a low-level assistant, or maybe bring in a paraplanner. But it's all about really defining what it is that you're building and being sure that those early hires support that. Because if we had made the wrong hires early on, our growth would have been a lot more painful.
Absolutely. Everybody who was on the team when I joined the team was, I guess, dedicated to the mission, of spreading financial planning to Gen X and Gen Y. They worked really hard. They loved what they did. And they were very supportive when I came on the team, as I was trying to learn the industry and learn our little piece of the industry and how it differed from Northwestern Mutual, who I interviewed with when I was leaving the Navy.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And First Command and all the other folks that try to poach.
Yeah. When I was heading to my interview, I chatted with Alan. He said, "Hey, good luck in your interview, man. I'm sure you'll do great." And when I left the interview, I called him back. I kind of told him what the run through was. And he's like, "Yeah, you don't want to work there." Yeah, but it's been a great experience. And really, when you're that small, you just have to figure out what you don't want to do, right? Like the reason sales on this team came after marketing, came after Maddie, is because Alan was the end all be all at sales, right? Nobody could do it better for him than him. Nobody could give that up until he did give it up. And now I think he's been proved wrong on that one.
Oh yeah, that was one of those things that whenever we define like what are the roles that Alan has to continue to do, and sales was on there of like no one can sell the vision of what XYPN is better than I can, and maybe that's true. Maybe I'm still better at selling the vision than Stacy is. What I will tell you though is that Stacy is so much better. Stacy and Lindsay both is our sales team. They're so much better at sales than I am, and I think that's a couple of reasons. One is because they actually have a structured process they follow. So following processes are not my gift. They actually follow up with people and they check in with people, which is, when they say they'll send them a resource, they send it to them. Not something I am very good at doing. And quite honestly, I probably sold some of the wrong people on, hey, it's a great time to start your firm. And they were, maybe too young, too inexperienced, didn't have enough money, weren't ready. And I sold them a vision of something that I shouldn't have. And, Stacy and Lindsay are much better at pushing back and being sure that, things happen the way they need to. So going back to thinking more about the COO and sort of operations is what is the day in the life of a COO? Because I know we have entrepreneurs listening that are thinking like, who should I be hiring? They're wondering like, do I need an operations person? We also have people that are listening that are like, I'm a COO. I'm an integrator. I don't want to start my own business. I don't want to start my own financial planning firm. I may not even want to be a financial planner, but I love the idea of running a company. So what are the types of things, particularly early on when we were smaller, I guess, as compared to today, like what were some of the day-to-day activities and responsibilities and processes that you were focused on?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, P&L ownership falls to me. So that is one of my daily routines of checking cash flow statements, balance statements, and the bank account. And that was very, very important when we were much, much smaller. My primary, responsibility throughout the day is removing rocks for the folks on the team. So whether that's Alan, because he needs something done so he can go on dreaming, or one of the other teammates, Maddie, needs something, I'm there to help them solve that problem. I do a lot of the process building and standardizing of the process. We rolled out RACI charts for all the organizations. So anytime there's a project, people have different accountabilities within that project. We're taking that to another level now with the actual accountability chart that we're using. Any personnel issues, onboarding, offboarding, pay issues that aren't happening, those kind of things. Really just the day-to-day grind of it all. Documenting processes. That is something that we didn't really do very well before we started. The team has been great documenting everything out. And as we've grown, the roles have shifted more to problem solving than actually doing a lot of the process building, but it's kind of the same look and feel.
Yeah. So you mentioned RACI charts because I actually think this is a really useful tool. So what is a RACI chart? Because the name sounds RACI. What is a RACI chart and why? How do we leverage it?
Absolutely. RACI chart is RACI. It's a project management tool that I learned while I was at Insight. And what it does, if you take a project and you break it down by individual task. So if your project is to onboard a new teammate, and one of your tasks is to set up payroll, one of your tasks is to send the offer letter, one of your tasks is, so forth and so on. There's a box next to each task. There's an R, which is responsible. There's an A, which is accountable. There's a C, which is consulted. And then there's an I, which is informed. And everybody who's involved in that process in any way, shape, or form has a checkbox or has a check under what part they play in that task. So for us onboarding, back in the day when we were doing it small, I would be accountable for a lot of stuff and responsible for a lot of stuff. Alan would be consulted, like before sending the offer letter, and then informed whenever the offer was accepted, and we started the onboarding process.
Yeah, I like the delineation between consulted and informed confused me for a bit. So informed is, hey, I'm doing this, just a heads up. consulted means like, I need approval or I need your help on something, as opposed to just like, if you're just letting someone know, hey, so-and-so accepted a job, that's the inform. The consult though is the opportunity to actually involve that person, which, I think we just use Excel. Like we don't have any fancy tools. I mean, it's just columns across that have, overall, project is a couple of columns grabbed together, center merged. And then it's, what is the overall project? What's the individual task? And then again, who's responsible, sort of the RACI, and then you put names in there. If nothing else, even if you're not literally using it as a checklist, super helpful as you hire your first person or two or three. And as the team grows, to be sure that you're defining who is responsible for what. Because if no one is responsible, then it doesn't get done. Or if two people are responsible, then there's a ton of chaos because there's conflicting messages, conflicting information, which I think has been helpful for us to really define who does what, when the reality is a lot of our jobs can cross up each other if we weren't, defining it well.
So what I would highly recommend, if you're hiring your first teammate, your second teammate, or you're hiring an assistant for another teammate, if you're growing that big, is a process that we ran through with Maddie when we were hiring out her first teammate, where we had her spend a few days listing out everything that she did. Every single time she did a task, she wrote it down. And then what we did was we went back over that task list and we looked and said, hey, what do you really love doing? And then what do you do because it has to get done, but you'd rather get rid of it. Of course, it's Maddie. So she loved doing everything. But doing that also made sure that we didn't miss anything whenever we brought on her first teammate. Everything was still getting covered. And then also that there wasn't any duplication so that we weren't wasting anything, resources.
It's also a good way to define what processes need to be documented, because you can look at that chart and say, okay, well, I'm handing off this particular process and I haven't documented how I do it. And so, I know it's hard when you're a solo advisor building out a bunch of process worksheets. I know that's an impossible ask. And we see it from our academy platform that, especially in the first few months, a lot of the content we've created for those new firms is consumed in our, what we call our Start My Firm program. The operation and process module gets like 0 views. I mean, no one ever watches it. And I get it. Like, you have a lot of time, when you're first starting out, and the thought of documenting processes for yourself seems useless. And I get that. I didn't document most of the processes at XY either until I started having to hand it off. So building out a RACI chart is a really great way to just define what are you actually handing off and what is the process that person needs to follow in order to be successful at doing it. So what are some of the other tools and maybe ideas that you have for folks, again, as they're smaller, looking to grow, looking to add some of those initial team members, for things that we've been able to leverage and learn from that you feel like would benefit some of the newer entrepreneurs that are listening?
Yeah, absolutely. And once you've identified kind of what you want to get rid of, is a very poor choice of words, but offload onto your first teammate, that should kind of tell you who you're going to hire. Are they going to be in the right seat? So can they do the job? Do they want the job? That kind of thing. The thing you need to, I guess the next thing is when you start to look at hiring, hire for culture and team fit over just the ability to do the job. And that's something that Alan did extremely well before I joined the team.
Yeah, I'll say initially we pretty much hired purely for passion, and not to say that our team members didn't have a lot of skill. We just like who has the skill to be the director of getting things done at XY? Like, well, no one. It's who has the right personality to come in. Like, who do I trust to call a member? And anyone who knows Maddie knows, like, we trust Maddie wholeheartedly to be the person. Like, she needs to be on the phone more than I do with members. So, hire for that. And we say culture fit. I know sometimes that gets wrapped up with discrimination. Quite honestly, that people use culture fit as a way of excluding, underrepresented populations that like, oh, well, they're not a good culture fit here because, they grew up different than I did. And we say culture fit for us. The diversity in our culture is extremely important. And so just to define that, because I know that can be misconstrued at times or is abused in some companies, but we love people who are a little weird and have a different background and bring a unique perspective, because, they always bring something new to the table that really adds to the team. So what about day-to-day time management? So you still, even though we have a bunch of people, it feels like still wear a lot of accountability hats. So how do you manage time on a day-to-day basis to be sure you're able to get the job done, everything gets done, but you're able to go home at night and not, be here till 9:00 at night every night? Because you're not. I mean, you're working more than 40-hour work weeks, but you're hopefully not working 50. So
yeah, I try not to work 50, especially now that we live in Montana and it's very beautiful outside. I can go home, ride bikes with my kids. Honestly, the way I do it now is I have 3 to 5 bigger tasks that I want to get done each week. And they're on my little to-do list. And I start them on Monday morning and I start working project number one, task number one, whatever you want to call it. Then I work my way down. And then my calendar kind of fills up as the week goes on with meetings, with problems that need to be fixed, with onboarding people, stuff like that. And my goal is to accomplish all 3 to 5 of those things by the end of the week. It keeps me flexible, which in my job, I kind of need to be flexible, but also gives me, I guess, objectives to accomplish throughout the week.
Yeah, that's something I'm still dealing with, is how to best balance. Because, I wear 2 hats as, CEO of XYPN Network and also CEO of AdvicePay. So I have to switch between the two. But project management, like tracking tasks, tracking projects, is something we're still trying to figure out, because about the time I feel like we figured it out, we end up with a new project or, we've just grown and we have stuff that doesn't fit into the existing toolkit. I will say that we use Excel and Word, well, more like Google Docs, more than we should. But, sometimes that's the only way that we've found to actually keep things on track, at least from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the processes and procedures you build when you're small, there's not a tool out there that will do them the way you want to do them. And it's not really worth the pain to buy a bigger system to do it. There's a point in time in a business growth, and I'm not sure where that point is. I think it's probably different amongst the different departments, even for us, where it does become worth the pain to just suck it up and then adopt your processes and procedures to the tech that's out there just to make that easier.
So one of the other things that, when you were brought on, one of the tasks that you were assigned, and I feel like we do this jointly, but I want to hear your perspective on it, is just around people development. So, an advisor is going to bring in their first couple of hires, and they have these people that want to grow. And whether they want to grow the company or not, ultimately people want to grow. It's just in their human nature. So what do you feel like are some of the resources or processes that we've been able to implement here that have benefited, us in being able to develop our people to being able to their evolving roles or taking on more responsibilities and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And like everything else, we've done some things really good, I think, with this, and some things we're still have aspirations to do better. And the biggest thing that we've done is, I think, the 90-day plan that we implemented. There's a book called The First 90 Days, I believe, which is what the 90-day plan is really based off of. But it's 90 days of your first 90 days of the company, what you do, and it is very, very granular. By the end of the 90 days, you'll know whether or not that role is for you. You'll be up and running full speed. The thing we're looking at doing in 2019 is actually formalizing, a more advanced training plan for teammate development. Historically, we've been kind of, on an as-needed basis. We sent a couple of people to project management school. We sent Tori to the event planning conference, those kind of things. We've done it very randomly, but 2019, we're putting into place to make sure everybody gets formalized training that supports their individual development plans and where they want to be in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so there's two tools there that you're mentioning. One is the 90-day plan. I can't remember what book I stole this from, but the directors really picked it up and ran with it. And that is, basically, and it's a good exercise is to think about, okay, I'm hiring this new team member. Within 90 days, 3 months in, where do I think they should be? What should they know? What types of tasks should they be doing without any assistance? What are my goals for them? Are there any books they need to read, podcasts they need to listen to? And so by the 90 days, what all needs to be done? And then backing in and creating a plan for how are they going to get there? And you may see that, like, all right, I'm giving this person too much. Quite honestly, a lot of our 90-day plans turn into 60-day plans because our team members come in and just crush it and knock out all these things. And, they're reading the book that wasn't assigned until month 3. They're reading it month 1 to get ahead. But it is a really good exercise to be sure you're really clear, because when you hire that first person, so often I see that first hire fail And I think there's a couple of parts of that. It could be part of the hiring process, but I think a lot of it has to do with just a lack of clarity around the role that you want that person to play and the job you want them to do. And so being very clear about that just really does set the expectation. And the second thing you mentioned was is an IDP, or individual development process plan. So what is that, and how do we leverage it?
Yeah, so an individual development plan is just a chance for a manager and one of their direct reports to sit down and actually look 5 years in the future. Right. And I mean, does anybody really know where they're going to be in 5 years? No, but you have to make goals if you want to get there. So what you do is you set your 5-year goal, and then you set 3-year goals that support that 5-year goal. So it should go basically 1 5-year goal, 3 3-year goals roughly, and then 1-year goals that would help you achieve your 3-year goals and then your 5-year goals. We do that in January with our normal review process. And then quarterly, we'll be checking in on them in 2019. It'll be a quarterly check-in to see how folks are, progressing down that path.
Yeah, so really this is our opportunity to learn, what does someone want to do when they grow up? The truth is, one of the misconceptions I feel like in financial planning is every hire is a for life hire, that you're going to hire an associate advisor and they're going to be with you for their entire career, which is basically like getting married before the first date. Like, it's a really big commitment that we're asking people to make, and it can scare people, I feel like, into not sharing their evolving goals, because you may find out you hire an associate advisor, they get in a year in, that through the IDP process, they say, I really want to be operations and compliance. Like, I want to run the company. I don't really want to be an advisor. Or vice versa. You hire someone on the operations side and they really want to become an advisor. Like, it's a really great opportunity to have that conversation. Say, okay, you want to be an ops manager instead of a financial planner. Let's create a 1, 3, and year plans in order to get you to your 5-year goal of being the COO of this firm. It's the opportunity for people to actually share what they want to be outside of their current day-to-day, which comes with the expectation that you need to be trustworthy with that information, including that if they say, like, I want to go make movies for Disney, I don't know, like I want to do something completely outside the industry in 5 years, and I want to build towards that you're willing to support them in that and not just fire them the next day because they're not going to be with your company long term, because that defeats the purpose of asking them what they want to be when they grow up. Yeah,
I'd say that's, especially as a small advisory firm, I'd say that's one of the very key points is when you bring in a very young junior advisor, understand that they might want to one day do exactly what you're doing, right? And go out on their own and build their own thing. Don't hold that against them necessarily. Help them develop. You will gain value from them. They will gain value for you. Mutually beneficial relationship. But as long as you're open, honest, and transparent about the process and supportive of your teammates, I think the process works very well.
Sort of a cliche thing, but I've seen the meme that, I guess it's normally CFO says, what happens if we invest all of this money into our people and then they leave? And the CEO responds, well, what happens if we don't invest in them and they stay? There's this belief that the only way to get value out of a team member is for them to be there for life. And I'll say that, if you hire the right people and you invest in them, you will get, 10x the value back from them that you're investing, even if they're only with you 3 to 5 years. Millennials on average change jobs every 3 years. You should expect that new hires are going to stay with you for 3 to 5 years. So my question is, how do you get as much value as possible from that team member while investing as much as you can into them to help them develop? And again, so that if they decide in 5 years, like, I want to go start my own firm, and they do it with integrity, they're not like trying to undercut you and poach all of your clients and steal client information. All right, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, like, they want to do it the right way, the same way you did. How do we support that and allow them to do that? Which is something that, we preach a lot about here at XY, is making sure that we're supporting our team members in their own goals. But I will say it's easier said than done. It is a tough conversation when someone says, they want to do something that's outside of the business that we're in. And we either have to head that direction, whatever direction is that they want to go, or we have to part ways eventually.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there has to be a conversation about what their 5-year goal is actually in line with, what we can do for them at the company. If you have a junior advisor who says, hey, I want to go be a Disney character at Disney World, maybe that's not really a career path you can accommodate, in your small advisory firm. But if they say, hey, one day I want to be you, I want to grow up and do my own thing just like you did, I think that's something where you can both gain value in the process.
So switching gears a little bit, anytime you hire, well, really anyone, but particularly a COO, really what you're handing off is a lot of the run the business activities. Any recommendations to the entrepreneurs listening on delegating and how to actually hand tasks off? Because it is a challenge.
What I would say is you have to hire somebody you trust to do the job you want them to do. And then you have to hand it off and let it go. Alan is very good about handing stuff off or dumping stuff off when I first started. And it was fine. And I knew he was always there for me to go back and ask questions to if I didn't know something about the industry or about membership or something like that. I guess, the biggest thing is just being able to actually let go, let that person do the job, give them, I guess, something to achieve, but don't tell them how to do it. Right. So Alan and I would have conversations and we would set my goals for the year. Like we need to do X, Y, and Z by the end of the year. And then that would be it. And we would have check-ins along the way to make sure things were getting done and that I was, maintaining the culture of the company, that kind of thing. But don't meddle, I guess would be it.
Yeah, there's sort of this balance between delegation, not abdication. And I found myself abdicating at times where it's like, okay, go do this. And then like never circling back and checking in. And I've had bosses that do that. And then, 6 months later, they're like, hey, is this thing done? And, get mad when it's not done. It's like, well, wait a minute. I didn't even know you cared about that. Like you briefly mentioned it to me one time. And so there is this balance between like, you need to be able to delegate and hand things off. You also need to have a plan in place so that there's expectations around when it's going to be done by, what the end goal is. But to your point, if you're hiring the right people, they should be able to build out their own project plans and their own, overall implementation plans, depending on what that is. Too often I see advisory firms hand off, hey, we want to do a CRM transition. And then, the associate advisor goes, spends a bunch of time, selects a CRM, gets ready to go. And the firm owner's like, no, we're not going to go to a new CRM right now. And it's like, well, you just assigned a huge project and then like pulled the rug out from under them. Like give them, if you're going to give them a task, let them run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the most demoralizing things ever. If you read anything about what motivates employees and what demotivates them, having a lot of time invested into a project and then having the rug pulled out from underneath them, very demoralizing.
Yeah. Having to throw away work is hard. Anytime you've worked on something and it doesn't, it just sits on a shelf or gets killed as a project is tough. So we're sort of running up on time. I will say that for all the confidence, I'll use the word confidence that comes with being a Navy helicopter pilot, this is the most nervous I've ever seen you, was making you come onto the podcast. Like I said, Raul has delayed and delayed and delayed. So I'm certain because, he listened to the podcast early on and I think got tired of listening to me. I burned him out on the first few episodes. 48. You made it through 48. Didn't even make it to 50. That's my story is episode 50. So the last question, but I doubt you prepared for it.
No.
And that is, if there's one piece of advice that you could go back and give your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you had known before, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
That life doesn't go where you think it's going to go when you're young and just be ready for the change.
And you can prepare for change. You may not know what direction you're going to go, but you can do things like furthering your education, meet everyone, be nice to everyone, because you never know when someone that you were nice to will come back around and be the person that helps you later on. But yeah, I love that advice because it's so important because I had no idea this is where I was going to be. I thought I was going to buy some aging advisor's financial planning firm. When I first came out of my career, I thought I would still be in Rapid City, South Dakota, buying Rick Kaler's financial planning practice. And I love Rick. And maybe there's a part of me that's a little sad that's not what happened. But, things change and you end up in a different spot. I had no idea that, we'd be running a platform that helps financial advisors. That I thought I would be an advisor, and I haven't been for, over 3 years now. I guess I sold my practice in 2015. So, and you never thought you'd be the COO of a company in Bozeman, Montana. So
nope, I'm supposed to be wearing pajamas to work and flying helicopters for the rest of my life.
Well, Raul, thank you for putting the nerves aside, taking the time to come on this show and share your wisdom as a COO. Hopefully this was helpful for the entrepreneurs that are out there that are thinking about hiring a COO, and for the future COOs that are out there that are looking for opportunities and realizing their strengths may lie in running the business activities as opposed to maybe the actual financial planning activities. So thank you so much. XYPN Radio listeners, you're invited to attend the event of the year, and even better, you're invited to get your pass at the best possible price. The can't-miss annual XYPN Live Conference returns to St. Louis in September 2019 with valuable content for new firm launchers and established firm owners alike. Take a couple of days to work on your business instead of in your business, and connect with like-minded financial advisors leading the real financial planning movement. Go to XYPlanningNetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to get a deal on your pass through the end of the month. But hurry, the price goes up at the first of the year. Visit XYPlanningNetwork.com/XYPN Live Radio to grab your pass today. Be sure to join our VIP community at XYPlanningNetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN Radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to XYPlanningNetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.